Hi, everyone. Welcome to our series finale for the Pursuing the Esquire's Legal Lifeline series. This is our highly anticipated entertainment law insider. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to my team members so we can get started.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Yetunde Brimo. I am a team member at Pursuing the Esquire, and I want to welcome you all to the Entertainment Law Insiders panel. This is the last event of our July panel series entitled Legal Lifelines. For those who've been tuning in since the beginning of this month, we want to thank you. Those just joining on, you're not too late. Stay tuned. Before we get into tonight's panel, I want to direct you to our website very quickly, where you can check out more resources that our program offers, as well as our mentorship program. And I also want to shout out our Instagram page. Feel free to follow us at Pursuing ESQ. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce the founder of Pursuing the Esquire, Danielle Hardy, who will be hosting tonight's panel.
Thank you, Tunde. And welcome everyone again. I just want to personally thank those who've been watching all month long. You've joined us every week, and now it's week 5. We appreciate the support. Thank you for sharing every event that we've had, for tuning in, for tagging your favorite lawyer below, just to help us spread awareness and help to provide great representation in our legal field. I'm extremely excited for tonight's event, as I have Endi Piper and Desiree Talley, who will be joining me in tonight's conversation to talk all things entertainment law. So without further ado, I will begin introducing our guests. First up is Desiree Talley. She is an entertainment attorney and cultural commentator. Her love for entertainment and experience in both the music and television industries led her to found Talley Law Group PLLC. Before launching her own boutique entertainment law firm, she held positions at Viacom Media Networks, ASCAP, Pandora Media, and Turner Entertainment Networks. As the co-host of pop culture and entertainment law broadcast Pop Loud podcast, Desiree strives to teach African-American creatives how to protect their art and the legal significance of their deals. She is a proud graduate of Hampton University, which she calls the real HU, and St. John's University School of Law. Welcome, Desiree.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
And next up, we have Endi Piper. As general counsel of Complex Media, a digital media company jointly owned by Hearst and Verizon Communications, Endi oversees all business and legal affairs for Complex and serves as their corporate secretary. As a part of their senior management team, she advises senior execs on matters including, but not limited to, corporate transactions, licensing and acquisitions, productions, business strategy, corporate governance, privacy, litigation, and intellectual property law. Prior to Complex, Endi was the Senior Vice President of Business and Legal Affairs for TV One that produces original programming for the African American audience. In this role, Endi oversaw the business and legal affairs, human resources, rights and clearances, and standards practices departments, as well as providing guidance and oversight for all of the company's litigation, contractual, and corporate governance obligations. Prior to leading the business and legal affairs department, she consulted with Radio One, now Urban One, in supporting the launch of the TV One network in 2004. And subsequently served as the Director and Vice President of Business and Legal Affairs at TV One. Endi began her legal career at BET in the business affairs and transitioned to production counsel in legal affairs, where she supported the production of original programming and negotiated the majority of the network talent deals. Additionally, prior to joining, she was the Director of Business Affairs for Scripps Networks Interactive, where she guided negotiations for a high volume of programming, acquisition, and licensing deals, and oversaw rights and clearances for HGTV, Food Network, and DIY Network. Endi is an active member of the Board of Directors for BESLA, which provides legal education and professional development for lawyers, law students, and other professionals in the entertainment, sports, and related industries. Through court-appointed special advocates, Endi was an advocate for severely abused and neglected foster children in Prince George's County, Maryland for many years. She also taught commercial law to practicing Black lawyers in South Africa and Namibia through the International Seniors Lawyers Project for multiple summers. Endi was recognized by CableFacts as top lawyer as one of the most influential minorities in cable. She was also recognized on Inside Counsel's R3 100 list, which highlights rising in-house women lawyers. Endi received her bachelor's in Spanish language and linguistics and a Juris Doctorate from the University of Virginia. She also completed the coveted Cable Executive Management program at Harvard Business School. Welcome, Endi.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. I am so honored to have you all join me on this panel tonight, especially as this is such an important industry in our community, and representation, at that good representation, is really important to propel our voices and make sure that our content is protected. So without further ado, let's jump right into the conversation. So, Endi, if you could start with us, please. What are the top 3 things that aspiring entertainment lawyers should know about practicing entertainment law?
So, I mean, there are a lot of things you need to know, but the major thing I would say I'd start by saying is it's work. So a lot of people think that it's glamorous, and it is to a certain degree, but it's still a lot of work, and it's very challenging, and a lot is expected of you. So you're expected to kind of know the industry, but you still have to perform at the highest levels as a lawyer. So that's like the primary thing. I think, I just think you should know that as you're going into it. I thought it was going to be a lot more fun than it is. I mean, it's still fun, but, I'm still expected to perform at a very high level. So that's the first thing. The second thing I think is that you should know that it's really about relationships. So you go into a lot of industries, you can just perform. That's just not going to be enough in entertainment. You really need to foster relationships with people. It will determine like where you get internships, lead to kind of where you're going to end up working, kind of who you know and who you have access to. Also controls how much access to information you have, which in turn will determine how you can succeed in your job. And so relationships are really, really important. I will say that my favorite thing, and this is my third thing about working in entertainment, is I found a space where I can be my complete authentic self. So like I started out at BET, I worked at TV One, I'm at Complex, I can wear sneakers, I can wear hoodies now, I have an afro, I can wear my hair out. And people, because it's a creative, a lot of time, not all spaces, but the spaces that I've chosen to go into in the entertainment space are also very creative spaces. I've been able to be my full authentic self. So that's something I really appreciate about the industry.
I can appreciate, your tip about it not being all fun and games in the beginning. It's definitely a lot of work. And even as a junior attorney myself, I see that on a day-to-day. The industry itself may be, full of content and full of music and entertainment, but it's a lot of work behind the scenes. So I can appreciate that for sure. Desiree, what are your top 3 tips about entertainment law?
I definitely think with it being a lot of work, sometimes people have the misconception that you'll make a lot of money in entertainment. And that's not necessarily the case. Starting out is definitely a grind job. You have to work and get your name out there. Again, relationships are important, and it's about building those authentic relationships and not just necessarily when you need something. And then there are so many avenues of entertainment. People just hear the word entertainment or say, I want to be an entertainment lawyer. But if you like tax, you can be a tax lawyer that works in entertainment. If you like criminal law, a lot of entertainers have criminal lawyers. So there's different things that you can do. It's not one note. So I would just suggest that people do a deep dive and understand what exactly they like, and don't look at it as a full umbrella.
Absolutely. I think those are really good, tips, because oftentimes you hear entertainment law, you might think of just contracts. doing the record deals or doing the talent deals. But there's so much, that goes on behind the scenes, whether that's IP law, any other avenue you can make it into the industry. So I can definitely appreciate that. So just transitioning into what both of you spoke about, which was the importance of building relationships. Could you share some do's and don'ts of networking? Because I know as a law student, I would hear all the time, network, network, network. Network is important to get into the industry. It's about who you know. But oftentimes they're not telling us how to network properly. What should we be doing? What should we avoid? As a law student, I remember being eager and wanting to reach out, but not being annoying, at the same time, and, sending too many emails. So Desiree, if you could start and share some do's and don'ts of networking within the legal, field and entertainment.
Well, as a law student or a person that's not in law school and trying to enter into the space, I think it's really important to attend calls like this or different types of events and let people know what you're interested in. And typically, particularly being a student, they're more likely to respond to you. And it may not necessarily be immediately, but letting them know. And it's more than just picking their brain. I really don't like when people say, let me pick your brain. And I like to see people go the extra mile. So for example, social media is a big way of communicating now. And a lot of law students and some potential clients send me DMs, but there's links to my website and my email address on my social media. So the people who go the extra mile of actually clicking the link and sending me an email or messaging me on LinkedIn get more a response and a quicker response than someone who sends me a DM. So I definitely think going that extra mile is a big part of networking, attending these events. And, you don't have to necessarily ask for anything in the beginning. You can say, hey, I attended this Zoom call. If you're ever in the area, I would love to take you out for coffee. And it can be just that simple. And so I think doing things like that gets you a little bit more rope than just saying, let me pick your brain, or sending a list of questions.
Absolutely, because I know, as both of you know, we get 100 emails a day. And so, if you're getting an email with 10 questions that someone wants you to answer, it feels more like another, project that you have to work on, and it just takes away from so much. So definitely, that was a great tip about the email.
And sometimes the list of questions work for me if that's the second email. I might say, hey, I can't hop on a call, but happy to chat. Please send me all the questions you have, and then I'll answer them that way, but not leading with that works.
Absolutely. So just to go into more of the DM, I know social media, like you said, is a big way to communicate. Do you have any tips on how to maintain a professional social media platform if you're looking to get into the legal space? Because I know as attorneys, we are still, looked at with a different lens than maybe a creative when it comes to our content that we're putting on, if we're representing a company or a firm, or, we have our own firms. What are some tips for social media and wanting to launch a career?
Well, I'll speak to that because I haven't said much to this. You have to be very careful with what you're putting online, because as a lawyer, there are ethical obligations that you have. And so there's something called moral turpitude that you don't want to be accused of. And that means you've done something that's not, fitting of a lawyer. So what's on your social media matters when you're functioning in a legal space. And you should just be aware of that. I honestly keep all of my accounts closed. If I were trying to be more of an open, like if I were like Desiree and I had my own firm, it would be very different. She has a podcast, so she can speak to that. But for me, because I work in-house and I know that whatever I do, I'm an officer of the company. I am representing the company, even if I say I'm not. My accounts are closed and I'm still very particular about what I put online. So I will say that. Desiree, I'm sure, is very different how she approaches it.
I have that balance because I am still an attorney at the end of the day. And although I'm creative and I'm out and showing my life to a certain extent, I just make sure that I'm not overly sharing. One thing that I learned just for safety issues, and once the podcast started growing and I was doing more media coverage, not posting where I am exactly when I'm there, that's something that, a brief story, an attorney I was negotiating with wasn't doing well in the negotiation. He found my personal contact information and he sent me a very nasty email. But he referenced the in-house deal that we were doing. I was in-house at this time. So I just escalated it for him to our company, and he was outside counsel with his private practice, and he got let go from that. So I think you have to watch what you do and say. I can be a little bit more lenient because I do work for myself, but I'm not opposed to going back in-house. So people always remember and watch what you post. I'm also mindful of that.
Absolutely. I think that's really important too, especially with security, reasons, if you're out in an event, in the industry, or you're saying, hey, I'm going to be here at a certain time, you never know who's going to show up and, what their motives can be. So that's a really, really good point. Endi, if you could share your networking do's and don'ts.
Ooh, so I'm really big on networking. It's like my thing. That's how I got my jobs. That's how I got into the industry. So, I think you have to get to a space first where you're confident before you even start trying to network, because if you're not confident, you're not going to come across properly. So you need to be confident in yourself. And that's a process that every individual has to go through to get there, depending on where you are and what you're asking and how you're coming at people. But just be thankful. You all can essentially contact anyone, which is exactly what Desiree said. During my time, I used to have to go to the library and do research to find out an address and go somewhere and type a letter and put it in the mail and send it. And so now with, everything being digital, you have access to everyone. And you need to utilize that. You have to use the people that you have access to. My thought is you have to be persistent, but you just can't be a stalker. And there's a fine line. There's a really fine line there. So I kind of decided, I know you all had the D9 panels. So from pledging, I'm a Delta. And from really pre-pledging, I determined you can't really tell me no. And so my continual persistence is I just don't want it to be annoying. So what I would suggest you do is you reach out to people on email or LinkedIn, whatever your preferred way is. And, when they're non-responsive, you should continue to hit them up occasionally, maybe send an article that they might be interested in, something showing that you're still interested in connecting, and ask them, continuously to connect. You can't do it every day. That's the thing. And so there's a fine line, and each situation is going to be different. But you might even need to ask someone to help you work through it. Someone that is a lawyer, like, hey, I reached out 3 times. I haven't heard back. What do you think? But I do think that you should be persistent without being a stalker. What you'll find is that when you finally connect with someone, they're very open to talking to you once you get them. And I think that what you have to remember is that people have jobs and they're stressed. Like, lawyers are working around the clock, and you're at the bottom of their list is to respond to your message. And I don't think a lot of people trying to network think about that, but that's kind of what it is. They're totally not being disrespectful to you or blowing you off, but they have like 20 things on their list, and today they only got to 3 of them. And so that's kind of what you need to think as you're networking, and give them time. It could take months to get a response from someone. But in my days, I might have sent my resume. You kind of just try to build something. Eventually, most people will respond. I'd say 3 out of 4 people will eventually respond to you. And then once you get them, you just want to keep them. And so that that requires, like Desiree said, you want to try to set up a time to meet in person, because what happens is when someone sees your face and they can actually meet you, they will remember you. And so you might even think that you didn't have a good like connection with them, and they might call you like 6 months later, hey, someone called and asked for, they're looking for someone, they're looking to hire someone, and I remembered you were interested in this. And so it's kind of like, you just kind of have to keep putting yourself out there, and it feels very strange, but it's kind of something that you have to suck up and do if you want to work in the space. I know it's a lot, but.
Absolutely. I think that's a really, really great point that is relatable to a lot of law students. I know for myself, I experienced that, reaching out. I reached out on LinkedIn a lot in law school. I went to law school in North Carolina, so it wasn't near New York City or LA. So I had to get creative with my networking. And I just remember sending tons and tons of emails and messages on LinkedIn. And like you said, it took a couple of messages, but then once you had their attention, they're like, yeah, let's set up a call. It's like, finally, we got in touch with them. So absolutely.
I would like to add too that right now, while everyone's at home, this is a really good time for you to try to schedule a Zoom call. And what I suggest you do is you ask for 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. Do you have 15 minutes to spare? I'd really like to find out about your job and about your path to where you are, because what's happening is people aren't commuting, they're at home, they're way more open to talking to you. So this is like a perfect time to really network.
And one thing I'll add to that too with networking is one thing that I did that I saw manifest into another opportunity, which was even after a quick informational, whether that was on the phone, whether it was video, or whether that was in person, sending a thank you note, because then they remembered, that, hey, I did meet with this girl and they took the time to, send out. This was all feedback that I received later and was then referred for a job as a result of it. So I think that, sending that extra note just to thank, the attorney for their time, it goes a long way. So that's what I would add to that. Just for both of you, Desiree, if you could start, what's a typical day for you as an entertainment lawyer?
First, I want to say thank you, Endi, for those networking notes, because I am taking notes as well. Typical day, it varies. So before I moved to LA, I was working in-house and I had my private practice because it was completely different in the work that I was doing. So I would work all day in-house. It was a high traffic transactional job. Once I left, I had over 150 client accounts that I was managing and turning out agreements every single day. And then I would have to leave there and either record the podcast or I would have to do my client work, because I had clients who are creatives in the space, representing them on the talent side, and different creative agencies where I represented them on the business side. So it was extremely busy, and time management became something that I always felt I was good at, but I got even better at. So I definitely had to stay organized. Now the days vary while everyone's at home, and I have transitioned over to LA. I still work on New York time because most of my clients are in New York, and eventually I'm going to take the California bar. But I'm up early, responding to emails, responding to these client deals and getting the agreements out. And I like to get things out quickly to get it off my plate and can focus on something else. And so I definitely, have to sometimes block out different times to work on particular projects and not be all over the place to stay organized. But definitely organization is key.
Absolutely. Time management is so important in this profession. And I think that law school is a good place to start, developing that skill so that once you get out into the field, you can take that with you for sure. Endi, what's a typical day for you?
Ooh, so my days have changed over the course of my career because I've been practicing over 20 years. So my early days were very much like Desiree. So a lot of drafting a lot, negotiating a lot, always on the phone, never a dull moment. Those were my early days. And as I got more senior and like now I manage a department, it has really changed to managing other lawyers. So managing their work, which is a very different, I mean, it just feels different when you're managing someone else's work. And then also advising senior management. So I spent a lot of time advising. And I also function in a more business capacity now. I mean, I was doing business affairs before, but more focused on like the bottom line numbers, you know, the financials, like what our business goals are. So my job has totally changed over the course of 20 years, like, you know, as I've progressed, but still very enjoyable. I mean, I like what I do. I will say that my favorite thing to do is to negotiate. So I did enjoy the early days where I was doing deals all the time. I mean, it's just, that's my thing.
Wonderful. And I'm glad that the two of you were able to give that perspective because, you know, some of our viewers are interested in going in-house and some are interested in law firms. So I think that's really important to see, you know, both perspectives for sure. So if we could just take you back to the beginning of how you got your start into the industry. How did you get that foot in the door, whether that was an internship, a connection that you made? How did you really get your start into the legal community of the entertainment profession?
I'll start. So I've only been out of law school about 4 years, almost 4 years. So still fairly new. I was not, you know, I was interning not too long ago. But I went to a panel. It was hosted by PALS. I was a part of this program. I don't know if anyone's heard of it. They used to put on different types of panels in New York City. And it was an entertainment law panel. And they had 2 Black people on the panel. And so I was making sure that I went to talk to them and I knew who they were and where they worked before we got there because they put out the information. So I really researched them, and I had 2 questions each that I knew that I was going to ask them both before they left. And one of the women on the panel, I saw that she went to Hampton. So I knew that that was my end to tell her I'm a Hamptonian. And I spoke to them and I talked to them and they gave me their contact information. And I did send, I believe, them both an email. I enjoyed the panel. Thanks so much for all the knowledge. And that was it. And they didn't respond and that was okay. But maybe 2 months later, I was looking for my first internship, my 1L year, and it happened to be at their company. And so I did not email them, which I should have, but I thought, oh, they didn't respond to my email, so I'll just wing it. Luckily, internships, I had always been lucky at just blind getting the internships. It wasn't that easy after I graduated law school. But when I went into the interview and I told them my name, they remembered the email and then they said, why didn't you tell us that you were interviewing? I was like, oh, you know, I emailed you guys and you didn't respond, so I didn't know. And then, you know, I went through the same interview process as everyone else, but I had already kind of had that relationship with them. And so I definitely got the internship and they had extended it as long as they could. And it was at True TV. That was my first internship. And so I ended up being there 3 semesters. I couldn't go on anymore because HR said I would have to become an employee at that time and they didn't have the budget. But I still remain in contact with those 2. One of them is my mentor and I'm still looking for a Black woman to be a mentor. I don't have a Black woman that I can call and look up to like that. But you know, I made sure I stayed in contact. So that was my first introduction.
I think that's fantastic. And, you know, like you, I'm pretty new out of law school as well. I graduated in 2018 and I know just how important internships have been, you know, in getting that first start because I interned as well. So I think, you know, your story could show our viewers that internships just apply. Even if you don't know anyone at the company, take the leap. You never know what could happen. And that could definitely land you a further opportunity.
Yeah, all of my internships, I also interned at Pandora. I was at ASCAP. All of those I got without knowing people. I just interviewed. And once I got there, I built the relationships with the attorneys that I still speak to this day.
That's fantastic. And I hope that some of our viewers will have courage because of your story to just put that application in for the next cycle. Endi?
Yeah, so I, after undergrad, took 2 years off before going to law school. So the first year, I worked at a law firm in New York as a legal assistant. And so I was living in Brooklyn. And so this was the early 90s. So I was very deep into everything that was going on in hip hop and music. And I was really making a lot of contacts then. My second year out, before I went back to law school, I was working for the Wizards. They were the Bullets then in DC. So I was trying my hand at sports. But I ended up getting an internship right before I started law school with a firm called Osei & Woods. So it was Reggie Osei, who was later Combat Jack, who has since passed, and Ed Woods, who's both entertainment lawyers, in Beasla, who has also since passed. Ed Woods went to Hampton, Desiree. And I worked with them, and they represented all of the producers on Biggie's first album. They basically represented everybody. They represented Jay and Dame. I mean, everyone was in that office that summer. And so I made a lot of contacts. I started law school. And my first summer, though, I got a job at BET because the man that I interviewed with just happened to know some people from my chapter that were Deltas. And that's how I ended up getting that job. And then my second summer, I was at Motown, which I networked my way into that due to people that I met when I was working for Osei & Woods. And so those two jobs kind of helped me when I got out into the industry. By that time, I knew a lot of people. And so it really, really paid off because people kind of knew me. And a huge thing about knowing you is you have a reputation. I mean, it's really different now because you have social media, so you can kind of shape that yourself to some degree. But back in the day, before that happened, you actually had a reputation that was structured based on what you had done up to that point. And so I was able to, I was able to maintain or build and maintain a positive kind of reputation. And so it really, really helped me as I've gone through my career. But that was my, those internships. The internship before law school at Osei & Woods that was my kind of foot in, I'd say.
Wow. So I see in both of your stories that internships are really a great way to get that foot in the door, even if you don't have a contact. Making those contacts once you get into those internships and cultivating those relationships are so important. So just transitioning in that same conversation, we have a lot of law students who are watching, and whether they're 1Ls, 2Ls, 3Ls, I'm sure they're wondering, about the next application cycle with the COVID cycles. They're able to work remote. Unlike us who had to relocate to a new city if we weren't in, New York or LA at our own expense and find somewhere to live. What advice would you give for them to stand out in the application process for these coveted entertainment law internships? Either of you can start.
Well, to add to that a little bit, I want to backtrack. Networking across and building relationships across, and that means with your peers is important too, and that can be helpful in this COVID time as well. Before, I think a lot of people thought that you always have to network and talk to people older than you, but your friends may know of internships and opportunities as well, and ask your friends how they structure their resume if they work somewhere that you are interested in or doing that type of work that you're interested in. So that has been helpful for me as well. And I think some roles are opening up. I'm starting to see across the board internships as well. I know just from recruiters that I have spoken to, it is a little bit harder because you want to be able to train the interns and give them the full experience, but companies are still hiring and are still looking for interns, and you might have to have your own computer and do things remotely, but maybe it might be now you reaching out if they don't post it, or if someone works at that company and you like what they do, ask them if they have any projects that you can help them with and organizing files. I've gotten emails like that just for people wanting to get experience or read certain contracts. And that could be a way to, if it's not a traditional internship, you reaching out to someone that does that work, and then highlighting what clubs you are in school. If you have any leadership roles in that, any papers that you've written, any study abroad that you have done. I didn't study abroad into law school, and so that was a really great talking point when I was interning and looking for the next role. And so making sure you highlight those things, I think will be helpful too. And also like hobbies. I remember I went to get my bartending license certification because it was a downtime, and I put it on my resume. And so when I was interviewing early in my career, when I had it on, the older attorneys loved talking about that, and they just kept on saying, "Oh, so you can make us drinks?" And I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely." And so, that helped me too. But finding something cool like that can help you stand out as well. Or podcasts. I got the podcast. I have that on my resume. So anything that you do creative to add that.
Absolutely. Those are really great points.
Yeah, I'll add a couple. I think the first big thing is you want to get an interview. So in order to do that, your application needs to be as good as possible. Like, you have to make sure you can't have things when you're trying to be a lawyer, like formatting errors, grammatical errors. All that stuff shows that you don't have attention to detail, and that makes people not want to work with you as a lawyer. So you have to be very, very diligent about making sure that it looks good. And you might even want to get someone to help you, right? Another thing, a lot of times people say, they look at it and it says submit the resume, and then the cover letters, that's, you don't have to do that. It's optional. Well, if you really want the job, you should write a bomb cover letter, right? Like, I'm just telling you, these are the types of things that set people apart in that initial portion, like when you're trying to just get in. Mm-hmm. Also, your networking should be broad. So if you don't know anyone at the company that works in legal, but you know someone at the company, or someone that went to school with you works at the company in another department, you need to call them, because your first goal is to get an interview and to get in the room to interview. So anyone can help you do that. Typically, like at the company I work for now, if someone, in marketing calls me and says, "Hey, Endi, my friend is interested in a legal internship," we're going to take that resume and we're going to put that at the top of the pile because they know someone that we work with. So I'm just saying that to say, make sure you're networking broad and you're not solely focused on lawyers, because they're not the only people, if you're trying to work in-house, that can help you. Once you get into the interview, everything that Desiree said is right. You have to stand out. Like, anything that's interesting about you is going to be interesting to the people that are interviewing you. And the reality is, what you're looking for when you interview is some kind of touch point. You want to connect with the person in some way. You never know what that's going to be, but sometimes it'll be shocking. Like she said, she talked about, she had gone to get her bartender's license, and that turned into a thing. Like, that's amazing, right? So you just want to connect with people whatever way you can. And I also usually tell people that when you get into the interview, you don't want to hide who you are and what you want. Like, you want to be confident about who you are and what you're bringing. So that's a huge other piece, because that separates people too when you get in the interview. Like, some people come in and they're very timid because they don't think they have much to offer, but you can't present that way and think that people are necessarily going to hire you. Because what it is that we're trying to hire someone that can add to our team. So we want you to come in like, I have something to add. And a lot of times that could be as simple as you doing some research on the company so that oh, this company has these 2 projects they're working on, or they've done a partnership with so-and-so. And you just mention that, because we leave the interview saying, oh, this person had done their research. So that's very important. Also having just some knowledge of the industry, and you being able to show that even if it's just casual, like in your personal time, that you've read certain things or you keep up with the trades or whatever, you want to be able to show that you have a real genuine interest in whatever that company does. And those are the things I think that will really help you stand out, because those, I'm telling you, we hire people, that's who we hire. People that really are interested, people that are special. I see one of my former fellows on the call right now. Like, we hire special people. And so that's who people are looking for.
Absolutely. I think those are really, really great points that oftentimes, your law school, your local law school can't help you with this type of interview, especially going in-house. Mm-hmm. I know for me personally, going to a law school that wasn't in, a major market or didn't have a program that was geared toward entertainment, I was left to my own, research and trying to figure out, how do I prepare for an in-house interview as opposed to a law firm interview? They're very different. So those are really, really great points that both of you, shared to help our viewers in their application.
Oh, and can I add, tailor your resume for that role. You should not have a generic resume that you submit to every position that you apply for. It needs to highlight the keywords in that job description. So.
Yes, that is such a good point for both resumes and for cover letters. Just to add, to Endi's point of doing the cover letter, it's so important. And I think that's a good time to throw in those keywords from the job description, the post, so that, sometimes the cover letters and the resumes are thrown into a system. And if they pick up the keyword, then they'll be able to, pick you out of the group. And also another tip for your cover letters, I know it's easy to just make a quick template, because you're sending out 100 applications, but make sure that you change the company in every one of your cover letters, because it's easy to just send, a cover letter you've already done, you change the top, but maybe at the end you have the wrong company, and that could be, the end of your application cycle. So definitely spell check, grammar check, read out loud, your cover letter, have someone else read it, just to get another set of eyes, to make sure that there are no errors that would, unfortunately end your time. Just to transition a little bit, and, Desiree, I could definitely relate to what you said about mentorship. So I started this program to provide mentorship to get law students, minority aspiring law students, get to and through law school to diversify our industry. But one thing that I found that's similar to you is that it's hard to find that mentor once you get into the workforce, right? Hard to find that Black woman attorney, that you can go to and seek advice, both on and off the record, to help you navigate, through the early parts of your career. How would you maybe give advice as to seeking a mentor, whether you're in law school or post-grad, just knowing the importance of mentorship to you?
I think mentorship, you have to distinguish between having a mentor and a sponsor. And so I do have sponsors, and those are the people who are working with you just to get the job. That'll validate your credentials. You're not calling them for advice and how to navigate the world. If there's a job that's open, that they have the connection, then you call them. My sponsors are white men and women. The climate that we live in, they are typically more helpful. And that's not to say that you can't have Black sponsors, but the ones that have helped me a lot are white. And I just email them like, hey, this is the job that I'm interviewing for, help me out. What should I say? Do you know this person here? What are some points? And I have a list of questions, and they're happy to, recommend me. My mentor that I do have is a Black man. The first person that gave me my job at True TV. And so I just maintained that relationship. I told you I worked there for 3 semesters. I always let him know what I was up to, what I was looking for, what I was doing, or even let's just go to lunch. I have some money now. I have a job. Can I take you to dinner? Things like that. So it's just definitely about reaching out to people when you don't want anything and just letting them know what you're doing. And I think that goes a long way as opposed to just talking legal. Or if there have been times when I've gotten free tickets to events and I couldn't go, I would reach out to those mentors or potential mentors and say, hey, I have these tickets for an event. Do you want to go? Do you know anyone else that wants to go? Or letting them know about different events in the industry that I know we've talked about and they're interested in, and sending articles if they may have seen it, but just sending it anyway to keep that open line of communication. And so while I do have Black women that I reach out to and talk to and let them know what I'm doing, I just don't have that solid mentor, but I'm going to keep trying. She will come.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely can relate to that.
Yeah.
I want to add to that. A lot of times, I mean, like what you're saying is real, and mentors kind of choose you, right? So I think that like what's happened over my career is there are people that I reached out to, and then I did my best to just be excellent, and then people will come along. And when the mentor chooses you, it's like the best mentorship possible. So yours just hasn't come yet, Desiree, but that doesn't mean, do you know what I'm saying? Your Black female mentor, that doesn't mean she's not coming. But when it does click, it will like be perfect. And I agree with what you said about sponsors versus mentors. What I've found is like, your mentor has to be a person that's going to navigate you through your career, but also that they have to understand you as a human. Like they have to understand what makes you tick and how you work, which means they really need to have a genuine interest in you and need to like you, right? Because they need to have the hard conversations with you. They need to be the person that can tell you, oh, how you handled that was wrong. You messed up. This is what you need to do to fix it. Let's talk through this. Like that's who your mentor is. That's a person, that's supposed to be someone that can really tell you about yourself if necessary and help you to grow. So it's a really important thing, and everybody needs one, but they will pick you. So what you have to do is be your best self and continue to reach out to people until you make that full connection with someone.
Absolutely. That's a really great point. Actually inspirational for me as well as on my search. So I appreciate that, Endi, a lot. Just to transition a little bit into, how you can better yourself, how to, make yourself stand out, whether that's a job application or an internship application. What is the importance of joining certain organizations? I know the three of us are BSLA members, and I know this is my first year in BSLA. I found out about it after law school, but I know a lot of people know, as law students. So if you could speak to the importance of joining, professional organizations, which most time have a discount for law students, which is nice. So what's the importance of joining these organizations as law students to help with networking? Endi, if you could start.
Oh, okay. It's just another way to meet people. That's the big thing. It's like a concentrated group of people that do what you want to do. If you pick the right organization, that you can have as a resource. So when you are a student, they can help you potentially with your internships, people that you meet in the concentrated group, right? When you get out of school, that's still your resource for trying to find a job. But what I will tell you is what you'll find is those concentrated groups will also be a resource to help you get through your jobs, because there are people, like for instance in BSLA, there are people in BSLA that are experts in specific areas. And if you're a BSLA member and let's say your boss tells you to do X, well, you don't know what they're talking about and you can't find anything online or whatever, there are people that you can reach out to people and ask questions, and like based on your relationships, and it can save your life. So like all these groups, I don't think you join like every group possible. Maybe when you're a student, because you're trying to figure out what you want to do. But as you get further along in your path to becoming a lawyer, like once you get your first job, you're not going to have enough time to be in a whole bunch of groups. You might be able to be in one or two. So then you want to hone in on what you really want to do and who you really want to network with and focus on them. But that can really really change the trajectory of your career to it can just shoot you right up. And so that is definitely something you want to do.
Absolutely, that's a good idea. And as a new BISLA member, I've enjoyed it thus far. And it seems that, these organizations are getting creative even in COVID. So they're having, networking events that you're able to still attend, without going in person. So that's a really great option. Desiree, do you want to add to that?
I will say, these membership fees for these different groups do add up. So if you can't become a member, if you see that they have an event, tell them that, email someone and say, hey, I saw you posted this event. I would like to go. Can I volunteer to work the event? If you know someone that's a member, maybe you can go as their +1, and that can be another way that you can still attend and make that network connection.
Absolutely. I think that's a really great point. And, as students, money can be tight sometimes, not having all those fees, up front can seem like a deterrent, but I think that's a good idea to volunteer. So we will be transitioning now to accept some questions from our audience. So Kirsten will ask us, all three of us, for our audience Q&A.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kirsten Evans, and I'm a member of Pursuing the Esquire. I would like to thank all of our panelists for their time so far. This information is so important, especially for students of color who don't necessarily have access to this important information. So I really, really thank you. I also thank everyone who's listening this evening. You're truly making an investment in your future. So right now we have a really important question from the audience. And I'm going to pose this question to all of our panelists. And I'm also going to include our founder, Danielle, in the questioning as well, as she works in entertainment law. So the question is, can our panelists provide insight on the toughest challenges they face day to day and as a whole within the entertainment law industry as a Black woman? And we can start with Endi.
So, I think it's just like any other industry. If you're Black and you're female and you're checking 2 minority boxes, you're going to have some challenges working in corporate America. And I just think that there are challenges that, by the time I got out of law school, I already knew how to handle, right? So it is challenging from time to time. I think as I've gotten more senior, my challenges actually have gotten to be less. But that could be because I've learned how to deal with them better. But I do think, a huge part of this, and we've already talked about it, kind of, is you have to be very confident in what you bring as a professional. When you're confident in what you bring as a professional, you present different and people receive you different. And so that is something that I try to, just make sure that young lawyers get, because as a lawyer, what you're doing is advising people. And so people need to trust your advisement. And a huge part of that is how confident you are in what you're telling people. And so that goes across all lines, right? Color, gender, whatever. The bigger thing, though, is a lot of times we have to know that there is discrimination that occurs just in the world and everywhere. So we have to be a little bit more diligent about making sure that we're confident about what we're advising. And it will work well for you, but you're gonna have challenges. It's gonna happen, but you're gonna have it in any industry. That's my thing.
Thank you. Desiree, can you share?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Endi. Being a Black woman has been challenging in this space, and particularly young and a new attorney. And so sometimes I would get discounted a lot because I was young and hadn't been practicing that long. People didn't think that I knew what I was talking about. But I made sure that I knew the policies front and back. I knew the law, so they couldn't question me. And if they did, I knew where they can go look it up, and then they had to come back and apologize. So I always made sure that I was prepared, because once you are prepared, that's when your confidence exudes. And confidence is key. You can be young, you can be Black, but if you're prepared, that confidence will radiate, and it doesn't matter if you're Black or if you're a young attorney.
Thank you. Thank you, Danielle.
I would echo what Desiree just mentioned. So I've been working at Universal now for about 8 months. And in my department, I'm the only Black attorney that is a woman. So I'm the only Black woman attorney on my team. And up until a few months ago, I was the only Black attorney on my team. I have been grateful for the support that my department head and my management has given me once I've been given projects to lead or to handle, because with starting out as a junior attorney, you do try to find your footing. And sometimes it takes a minute to, get that confidence of, I know what I'm doing. They hired me because they know what I'm doing. I can be confident in making this legal analysis, this assessment, coming to this legal conclusion and arguing for it, with counsel. But it takes a minute. And I think having a good support system, on your team is important. But I have encountered, instances where I'm on a call with outside counsel and they're surprised that I'm young. I'm the youngest also on my team. I'm 26, so I, am very, very young in my department. So they, sometimes will ask, are you the lead on this? Or, is there someone else? And I'm like, absolutely not, it's me. And so let's get a deal, let's get a work done. Let's find this resolution. But, at the end of the day, I think whether you're a woman, whether you're young, it's going to be an issue, but it's all has to do with you finding that confidence in yourself behind your skill set, to make those decisions. Because, most of the time management will back you up and they'll, throw you those tips to help you, maybe with an argument. I'm not afraid to ask questions. So I'll draft an argument or I'll draft an email and I'll ask my supervisor or my department head to look over it before I send it out sometimes, just to make sure. But, you do encounter those things starting out as a junior attorney where, I've gone, into conversations with attorneys who are in their 60s, their 70s, their 50s. And so, they're surprised when they hear me on the other end of the phone or see me on the call. So, I think just giving yourself some grace and having those conversations with yourself, to boost your confidence, say, I can do this. I've been hired to do this job, but it takes time. It does take time. So I would just say to push through it. And once you get to that point, it does get a little bit easier.
Thank you. Thank you. We have a couple of other questions coming in. I apologize if we can't get to them all, but we will try to address each one of them. So the next question is for any of our panelists who feel compelled to answer. So Netflix just announced that they have acquired the rights to one-on-one, sister, and girlfriends. What types of considerations go into those discussions, and how can we learn about the entertainment business and what secures the deals?
I'll speak to that one. I'm not sure exactly what they're asking, but I mean, it's a standard license, right? What I will tell you is they're securing them because they know that people want Black content. So that's kind of what's happening now. I know Netflix, they went on this, they did the Black lead thing, which was so amazing. And they focused on their Black leads, and now they're licensing more Black content because I think there's a realization that people want to watch it. Licensing deals are pretty standard. I'm going to give you X dollars. You're going to allow me to distribute this program in this media for this amount of time. I mean, it's a very simple concept. Of course, there can be many iterations of that. But these are the types of things where if you come to BSLA, people sit around and talk about this stuff. And that's why groups like BSLA, where there's a whole bunch of lawyers of color, are very important. People do deals at the BSLA conference. Like, people are sitting down during the lunch breaks negotiating stuff that they, just didn't have time to finish before they left because the person they've been negotiating with is there. So that's all. I mean, these are the deals. You want to talk to older lawyers, they will sit down and talk you through how these deals work. But they're not even that complex. And I say to a lot of junior lawyers, like, none of this stuff is rocket science. You can do this. Like, all this stuff is doable. If I can do it, you can do it. People aren't smarter than you. They might have more access to information than you do, but that's where you have to use your contacts and Google to get that info.
Absolutely, absolutely. Using those resources are very important. So we do have a specific question for Desiree. As a lawyer and a podcast host, how do you manage working as a creative, but also managing your professionalism as far as an attorney? And also, are there topics that you stray away from and certain content that you choose not to comment on?
Yes. So if on the podcast, we would stay away from topics that are too controversial. We did not touch Bill Cosby, R. Kelly. We just did not want to talk about those things. If I'm currently doing a deal with someone, I may not talk about what's going on in that deal or just anything related to them in general. I try not to be too opinionated. The podcast Pop Law is a pop culture and entertainment law podcast. So we focus on the law and not try to be so gossipy. Of course, we might crack jokes and have opinions, but if we're pushing it a little bit too far, we edit that out. So our podcast is not live, but we do speak freely. And if we listen back to it before we put it out, we just decide not to put that portion out. As a creative, that's what I lean more towards now. And while still a lawyer, I remember that I am a lawyer at the end of the day. So I am particular about what I might put out, what I share, and I'm not involved in as many legal groups because I'm more on the creative side. So that worked out for me. The creative groups and events that I go to, when they find out I'm a lawyer and I have all these creative friends around me, they all need lawyers because they're creating content. So I never had to really work to find clients because I was in this creative space and they all needed help and I just did all of their work for them. So I definitely think that there is a balance, whether you're a creative or a lawyer or doing both, you have to be professional across the board, and your reputation is important no matter where you go. And a lot of times you only have one time to make an impression, and you have to make sure that that is the lasting one.
Thank you, thank you. We have a specific question for Endi. So you spoke about making sure that you know about the company that you're interviewing for. So what are some important things that you look for initially in entertainment companies when you're interested in working for them?
Oh, I would go, if they're public, I would go to look at all the information I could find about the company. I'd also these are also just general Google searches to find out if they're involved in any partnerships with other companies, if they are making any new content, if it's content related, if it's music, like who's coming out. Like if it's a label, you should know who's on the label, what projects are coming out in the next 6 months, like basic information if you're really interested in working there. I would also be, interested in, is the company doing well? Because if you're interested in interning, your goal is to try to get a job there. So you kind of want to know like what's going on at the company. So you definitely want to do some digging, but it shouldn't be that easy with Google. It shouldn't be that hard with Google. It should be pretty easy.
Thank you, thank you. is definitely important, because although you're being interviewed, you're also interviewing the company as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's very important to know who you plan on working for. So in the interest of time, I'm going to pose one final question to our panelists. But again, I want to thank everyone for being engaged. And this is definitely being recorded. And we're always open to answering questions off site. So the last question that I'm going to ask is pretty generic. And it's, what is the best way to advocate for yourself when seeking an increase in salary or promotion? I know money conversations can be uncomfortable for a lot of people, but in this industry, as hard as we work for, we have to advocate for ourselves as far as salary is concerned. So what are some advice that you can give as far as having those tough conversations about salary? And to anyone who feels compelled to answer.
I'll speak to that. It's a very hard conversation for people of color and women to have. For whatever reason, it's like you kind of have to be pushed to do it, or you'll think you want to do it, but then you're afraid to do it. I think you really have to, this is what I would suggest. First off, you don't wait until the final hour to start thinking about I'm going to go ask for an increase and a promotion. You need to, as soon as you hit the door at a company, you need to start thinking through, okay, what does a promotion and an increase look like here? And you need to deal with your manager as though you are looking to move up. It needs to be very clear. You need to work as though you're looking to move up, which means you need to be excellent in all you do. And then you need to keep record of what you're doing. So like when your review comes, you shouldn't go to your review and this is the first time you've asked about it. You should have regular meetings with your manager, and you should have asked your manager multiple times. Like, yes, I want to, I'm really interested in growth. There are keywords here, growth. I want to know how I'm going to grow in this position. They should be clear about what you think your next step is there, or what you're looking for. And you should be asking them how they see you growing there. It should be a conversation you're having. And before the 1 year mark, you should already have an idea of what growth looks like. So you should be able to go into your review with, well, these are the things that, we discussed that I needed to do to grow. And this is what I've done to date. If your manager tells you you're not ready for that, you need to get specifics. Like, okay, so what do you think I need to do to get to this level? And you need to set up a plan to do that. So to me, I just believe you should always advocate for yourself. And I always tell people this, but you can't just go in and just ask for it and just think it's going to come. You have to be prepared and plan for it. And depending on the company, you kind of need to know, how your company works. There's some companies where, they're going to give you an increase. They're going to give you an increase in title every other year. That's just kind of how it works. There are other places where people I just talked to someone recently. They were like, people stay in the same position for 5, 6, 7 years. That's standard there. So you kind of have to also know how the company works, and you have to go in kind of with an understanding of, okay, I've taken this job here. People stay in this role for 5 to 7 years. They're more than likely not going to shorten it for you. You might be able to convince them at 3 or 4 if you're a star, but if that's the standard there, you got to be aware that that's the standard. But you still should be advocating for yourself, even if it is. But that's kind of my take on it. And again, every situation is different, but I do talk to people a lot about going in and trying to ask for a promotion.
I would add, if you are interviewing for a job, try to do some research and see what the ranges are for that particular role in that company or in that state with that title. There are resources online. They may not be 100% accurate, but you can kind of get an idea of what people are making doing that. I think particularly Black people, we have to talk to each other about how much we are making. I know some people don't like to share the exact number, but maybe ask them for a range, because that will help the next person know what they're worth, because we are historically underpaid. And there are some states where if a person that has a similar background in education as you, and you aren't making as much as them, then when you bring that to the company, then they will match it. And one of my friends who works in HR, now I don't really answer the salary question based off of her advice. So she had always told me, if they ask you for a number, don't give them a number. Respond with, what is your compensation philosophy? And that is, are there signing bonuses? Are there bonuses? What does the vacation look like? And sometimes if you ask that question, then once the recruiter starts answering those questions, they might not even ask you for a number, and they might tell you, what this usually pays. And so then you can ask, what the growth opportunities are and things like that. I 100% agree with Endi when she said, keep track of what you're doing. And I kind of learned this the hard way when I did seek a promotion, but my sponsor told me later when I was talking to him, once I decided to leave the company because I wasn't getting what I wanted, I think it's always important to print out or save on your computer that initial job posting and what they hired you for, and then keep track, and you can do it every 1 to 3 months, the additional tasks and roles that you picked up. And so when you do go have those conversations, you have that comparison chart. This is what you hired me to do, and these are all the things that I added, particularly if they try to push back. So, sometimes it's hard to get that initial posting. So make sure you always keep that.
I appreciate both of you for that advice. I haven't been at Universal yet for a year, so I will be having those conversations soon. So I really, really appreciate that personally for that insight, because I will be using your tips very soon. I think those were all of our questions from our Q&A. Thank you so much, Kirsten, for facilitating that. I want to personally thank you, Endi and Desiree, for just taking the time to join our panel today. This is such an important panel to have, to see the representation, to see amazing attorneys who are doing great things on the East Coast, the West Coast, and everywhere in between. You have provided such great advice for all of our viewers and to me personally. So I want to thank you for joining us tonight. I want to thank also our viewers for viewing this panel. This was our highly anticipated panel, as well as our most viewed panel thus far. So I'm really, really grateful for the support. If you want to check out this panel or any of our other panels, we do have a brand new YouTube channel where we have posted all of our panels from this month for your viewing pleasure at your leisure. If you want to stay connected with us, all three of us are on LinkedIn, and we tag Desiree on our Instagram page, on our feed. If you're on Instagram, you want to find her as well. Thank you so much again for joining us. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation with both of you, and I just wish that you all remain safe and sound during this pandemic.
Thank you so much for having us.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Bye.